Hello and welcome to our Thursday afternoon symposium called Please Tell Me Something Good About Climate in the Salish Sea. And I'll tell you why I called it that in just a moment. I'm Ginny Broadhurst. I'm director of the Salish Sea Institute. Thanks for spending an hour with us this afternoon. We're really happy to have you. I live and work in Bellingham, Washington, which is the ancestral homelands of the Nooksack tribe and the Lemhi Nation. I am grateful to all of our Indigenous neighbors for the enduring care and protection of this land and sharing of knowledge. We're happy to be part of Climate Action Week this week, and a big shout out to City of Bellingham for all the work they're doing to support Climate Action Week. You know, there's a lot of information out there about climate. Not all of it is very positive. We're seeing a lot more wildfires, extreme storms, rising sea levels, warming temperatures. We're even seeing changes in the pH of our marine waters and right here in the Salish Sea. Here at the Salish Sea Institute, we released the State of the Salish Sea report last spring. The report emphasizes that climate change is causing environmental problems and that we're not doing enough to keep pace. It's a bit depressing, I will admit. My co-host for this afternoon is Hillary Wilkinson. She is a principal at Veda Environmental, and she has a podcast called Conservation Cafe. Hillary, you want to turn your video on? Hillary and I have been working together in the environmental field for quite a long time, and we've sometimes compared notes on how easy it is to feel discouraged or even depressed about climate and the health of the Salish Sea. So welcome, Hillary. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Jenny. It's wonderful to be here. I am very excited and an honor to be co-hosting this with you. I just want to very quickly say that, you know, Jenny, you mentioned feeling discouraged and sometimes depressed, and that was really weighing on me a lot in the last couple of years. And that was one of the reasons I started this podcast, Conservation Cafe. And today's forum is such a great kind of collaborative effort with that, because the idea is that, you know, you can't just stay in the state of discouragement. You have to really shine a spotlight on where progress is being made on these really important sustainability and climate initiatives. And so that's kind of what the podcast is about, is why I'm so happy to be co-hosting today, because two really wonderful examples of great work happening are going to be spotlighted today. So thanks for having me.
Awesome. So Janine, who's doing our technical support for this next hour, has a poll. We're just going to take a quick pulse of our audience, and please tell us how you are feeling about climate. And it's just on a scale of 1 to 10, and we'll see where you're all at. And while you're doing that, I'll just say, you know, we all need to learn more about what we can do as individuals to be more climate friendly. We all know we need to make more improvements in our daily activities, drive less, buy more efficient cars or appliances, eat less meat, fly less. But it's also really clear that it's the large scale actions where it's really going to make a big difference. So that's why we invited two speakers today to talk about a couple of very large development actions that are happening, one in Seattle and one in Vancouver. And so we'll find out from those project leaders this afternoon what's happening there. All right, so what does our poll tell us? All right, we've got 22% super depressed, 11% just above that. So below the line, I'd say the majority of people are definitely on the depressed side. All right, well, and nobody is feeling above a 7. Well, that's interesting, but not surprising. And what the literature on hopefulness is telling us is that, you know, we are not hearing enough about positive actions. And the more we can learn about the positive work that's going on, the more hopeful we'll be, and the more we'll also be inclined to take on solutions ourselves. So I am going to first we're going to hear from Ken Johnson, been working on the Climate Pledge Arena in Seattle. And Ken, do you want to come on? Ken is also on the advisory board for the Salish Sea Institute, as well as among many other hats that he wears. He's a Western alum and is quite involved in various activities that are going on in Western. So we're really happy to have you with us this afternoon, Ken, and hear a little bit about your work in Seattle. And then we will move on and hear about a story in Vancouver.
That's great. I am happy to be here. And you're right, I am a happy Western alum. I love Bellingham. I love the school, and always happy to sort of join in and talk about things that are important to all of us. And obviously, climate challenges is very real. We know that. And I'm going to talk a little bit about a project that is really a wonderful, exciting project, the Climate Pledge Arena, where the Seattle Kraken, the NHL team, is going to play, and all this excitement going on with that. And what's nice is we've added an element of it that is extremely positive news in terms of climate impact and what you can do about it. So what I'm going to do, I think, is share my screen and talk just really briefly about Climate Pledge Arena, and then we can come and get back to answering questions. But here's the key. The arena has been here since 1962, first as the Coliseum and then as Key Arena. And about 3 years ago, the decision was made to make it the home of a new NHL hockey team. The community is very excited about it. From my standpoint, one of the most important things about the arena from a climate impact, it is close in. It's a lot of time these arenas get built out in the middle of nowhere from the ground up. Instead, we did something really special, which is take the exact same location, even keep the same roof and the same windows, and then build a brand new arena. This is the arena as it looked when in 2016, when we took over the project. It had fell really kind of in a state of quietness as the Sonics had gone away, and a lot of money was needed to be put into it to make it a modern franchise, and a modern building that a franchise could operate in. So if you look at that building, this is where we are close. This is a rendering, but frankly, we are within a month away of having this look like this. A brand new arena, but on that close in site, very accessible to transit. Very accessible to the entire region in terms of a central location, and a plazas all the way around the building as opposed to just on 3 or 2 sides. This gives you a sense of what the arena is going to look like, and I'm going to show you some pictures. This is a rendering again, but it looks almost like this now. So again, 62, it was a flat building. 95, they excavated some, and then in the building we're doing, excavated all the way down into a level and a wideness that allowed the building to double in size. But to do it in a way, I'm going to stare, is you actually come in at the top level, the top concourse, and then the bowl is a subterranean bowl. So we kept the roof, which is a 44 million pound roof with tons of carbon embedded into it, steel and concrete, and then excavated below. So in terms of the cooling and heating impacts, is really protected from within. So this gives you a sense of demolishing the old building. We ended up having to take the windows out. We took all the windows out because they were landmarked as well, cataloged them and put them back in as part of the project. We cut off the columns so we could do the excavation and hold the roof up temporarily while we excavated 600,000 cubic yards of material. And now this is a live shot. This is what it looks like today or last week. You can see it's a brand new modern building. We kept the windows at the north end and the south end, but it is really primarily a subterranean bowl. That highest red, white, and blue sign, that's where the upper concourse is, then a suite level, and then the lower level bowl. The 2 scoreboards, and that's where the ice formation. We're all ready to start actually forming the ice in this final form next week. This just gives you another sense of how the building is. And the the support systems, the bollards and the columns that we reconnected eventually to form in. But here's the interesting story about the building. We were always planning on doing a very green building, like a gold lead. We were very, it's Seattle, and we pay attention to that. It's important to remember this is 100% privately funded arena. So even though it was 100% financed by the private, they were very interested in doing the right thing in terms of an environmentally sensitive, sustainable building. But it took another level of seriousness when we were approaching Amazon and others about the potential naming of the building. And the dialogue shifted from, let's name this building Amazon, or let's name it after a cause that is extremely important to Jeff Bezos and extremely important to the major investors in our building, which is climate and climate change and what we can do about it. And so the discussion ended up with, we're going to build the first zero carbon, net zero energy sporting venue in the world. We're going to commit to basically 100% renewable resource energy, being certified net zero carbon by the International Living Future Institute, offsetting all of our operation commissions from all the events, and in doing so, really also just beyond what we need to do physically, but our operations. So very quickly, physically, we were in the middle of construction when that decision was made. And it meant taking all the natural gas out of the building and switching it to all electric. It meant taking an approach on how we were dealing with water and using that in the building, how we were going to operate. But the key message, a little bit that Jenny talked about in terms of optimism, if not optimism, at least going in an attitude of we can do something on this. When we started out with the idea, there were a lot of people on the team, engineers, contractors, saying, well, this is just going to be too hard. We can't get there. And slowly we got there. We figured out what we needed to change in terms of air circulation. We figured out what we needed to do in terms, again, of power, cooking, recycling, all of those things, and quickly turned into a team that was unanimous, not just we can do it. This is really cool. I mean, this is something we can be really proud of, to be the first zero carbon arena in the world. And let's not, and this was important to Amazon as well as the major owners of the team and the arena, this isn't just about this building. It is about starting a trend in the building industry of these type of buildings and operation of these type of buildings. We can go to the next level and show them a way to do that. And so we are. This just gives you a sense there. We couldn't put solar panels up on the roof because it was landmarked, but on the new atrium, we put solar panels. We put it in our parking facilities, and we put it in our practice facility. It was the 3 sheet of ice facility 5 miles from here. We also, I think this is a wonderful story. The original design of the roof by Paul Thury was inspired by rain hats worn by the native Salish in the area. That's what he presented in '62 of why the roof had the shape it is. So someone said, well, we need to be talking about water use and water recycling. So we will be capturing water off the roof. It will be put into a cistern, and that is what we will use to make and finish the ice on an average night as well. So what that means is the Seattle Kraken will be skating on Seattle rain. I think it's a lovely story. There's going to be a lot of information in the building, a couple of big walls that talk about small things, big things that we've done to make the zero carbon happen. The diversion rate, 97% diversion. We're doing a immense number of things in this, in terms of the food here, where it's sourced, how it's packaged, how, in terms of the farming, it's meeting the Seafood Watch out of Monterey Bay. Really a great story. And so again, we went from people who were aware what was going on to go to a next level to talk about industry impacts, and everyone's extremely proud about it. And it's very interesting. The building will open with Coldplay on the 22nd of October. And they said, we want to open this building. If you know Coldplay, they are huge believers in tackling the climate challenge we've got right now. They said, we want to be there at the opening. We want to be there on stage. Amazon is going to live stream the concert. They are estimating 500 million viewers. And we will be talking a lot about what this building did and what it means in terms of the opportunity for other buildings. So it's a very fun project for a lot of reasons, but we're very proud of where we've come down on making a statement here.
Wow, that's amazing. I'm going to ask you just one question, and then we're going to move on to our other speaker, and then we'll come back and do questions for both. But I guess my one question I'm going to hit you with is, how did the price tag compare for doing it in this extreme sort of climate friendly fashion versus what would have been, the norm status quo?
The building is roughly $1.1 billion. The incremental impact from where we went from a very green building, but to carbon zero, is close to the 20-25 million range. So it is real, but it is small in comparison to the overall price tag of the building, and the operational impacts are important, very important. So that gives kind of a sense of scale. A lot of people say it's just going to break the bank. It didn't break the bank. It didn't break.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thanks for kicking us off with this. And I'm going to let Hillary make introductions for our next speaker.
Our next speaker, Bernd Christmas. And Bernd is the CEO of Unchkai. And Bernd, I hope you can correct any mispronunciations I may make. Apologies in advance. And Unchkai is the economic development arm of the Squamish First Nation. And Bernd is here to share the vision of development that is still kind of, in my understanding, is not underway. It's kind of very much in the vision stage. And the development is called Sanok. And this is a 10-acre site in downtown Vancouver, BC, that is also the Squamish First Nations ancestral lands. And when this vision is completed, it'll be Canada's first large-scale net zero carbon housing development, and also one of the first in the world to be such. And so, Bernd, welcome.
Well, thank you very much. And if you hear flight announcements and other noises, I apologize in advance. I'm at the airport here in Vancouver, and unfortunately in between flights. So having said that, thank you very much for inviting me to attend this afternoon and sharing the news on what we're doing with the Squamish Nation and the business arm of the nation itself. Just really quickly, background, Squamish is obviously an Indigenous tribe that's been in the Vancouver and North Vancouver area for time immemorial. We have land holdings in the Port of Vancouver, the surrounding areas, and all the way up to, if people, the audience knows, Whistler, the infamous ski area. So we have the tracts of land all the way up to there, as well as interests in waterways and other estuaries in that territory. Squamish Nation government a number of years ago decided to consolidate its and separate its business from its politics. This seems to be a move that's prevalent in a lot of tribal groups across Canada, and they're no stranger to this. And as such, we've created Unchkai Corporation to handle all the businesses. And just by way of background, some of the businesses we're involved in include obviously real estate development, the Sanok project. There's an international plaza project, a big mall called Park Royal. We have a couple of marinas, a massive forestry operation with new growth and old growth forests, retail operations, and soon to be fishing operations, among other things. The company has, like I said, been fairly new, and as such has a dedicated board of directors that have a wide range of expertise, whether finance, accounting, real estate development, et cetera, et cetera. So in regards to Sanok, what we have, as was introduced, we have a project that's roughly 3.5 million square feet on 10.5 acres. It'll ultimately have about 6,000 units within the 11 towers that we're going to build on this particular piece of land. And it's right downtown prime lands, as developers will tell us, on and on. And we think it's going to be very exciting from a sustainable development perspective. Clearly, the Squamish Nation, and I dare to say, generalize, many Indigenous peoples in Canada feel just as depressed as your audience did in their poll, and we have been for a long time, especially in relation to what's happening to our waters and our lands and the air that we breathe. So, you know, keeping that in mind, the Sanok project is going to be a state-of-the-art construction, and trying to reduce as much carbon into the atmosphere as possible. And as a result, we're going to, you know, make it a zero carbon housing development. And part of it will be utilizing mass timber and other innovations to build out this project. And of course, we'll also be looking at offsets. So one of the projects, one of the towers of the 11, is going to be 12 stories. So it's 45,000 square feet, and it will be a dedicated office space, and that will be constructed out of wood. So we're pretty happy on that, utilizing some of the natural resources that we have within our territory. And along the way, as this development starts in March of next year, knock on wood, we hope that the first few phases will have 1 or 2 buildings get underway, and then there's a phase out process over the next number of years. We'll be also creating an alternative transportation network, obviously cyclists and skateboarders and other two-wheeled forms or single-wheeled forms of transportation, walking space, a lot of that. Utilizing a lot of greenscapes and water-wise developments. Clearly, we're on the water, and we don't want to add any more pollution to the harbor that is already being caused by, you know, by container ships that are prevalent in the Port of Vancouver. And you know, mostly importantly, and it's going to cost us a little bit more, is obviously utilizing the latest technology in the construction industry to build these, you know, utilizing the latest materials for windows. We're trying to figure out if things like Portland cement is the ideal cement, or do you get into a different type of cement that can be used, like it's called Signa, a different type of new cement that may be even better from a carbon perspective than the current, you know, go-to technology on that perspective. So with that, I'll hand it over to the moderator and be willing to answer any questions.
One quick follow-up question, and then we're going to open up to everybody for questions of both panelists. My follow-up question has to do with kind of the financing of it. And you mentioned that it's going to be more money to kind of follow some of these sustainability principles. And could you speak to the financing of it? Are you finding that it's easier or harder to get the financing for this kind of project by building in these kinds of sustainability components?
No, our experience has been it's been relatively easy. Maybe because of the size. You know, the old adage, it's hard to get something. You know, if you're looking for, I don't know, $10,000, like you go through all the big hoops. But all of a sudden, when you say, you know, this project's going to net benefit nation $18 billion, all of a sudden people start, I don't know, finance world, they start throwing money at you. So you just go, wow, okay, thanks. You know, let's move that way. So that, I think that's been the fortunate side of things. It's maybe because of the size. You know, people are, we're not having difficulty on the financing side.
Thanks so much for being with us, Bernd, and nice to meet you virtually. There was a question that came in during the registration process about how the housing might accommodate people who are below the poverty line. Or you give accommodations for that.
Yep, for us in particular, part of the deal with the proponent was that we had to create affordable housing for nation members. Nation members, I stress they have to be nation members. And there's this a certain set aside for them. And then also one what we call the market housing, you know, for the people that are able to afford it. From the nation perspective, there's also a slight discount on that. But from a you know, people that are not as fortunate as some of us, you know, yeah, there's definitely a carve out piece for them. Yeah.
Thank you. There was another one that came in during registration that I wanted to share. How can one go about finding partners for ultra sustainable development? We own 4 acres zoned mixed use and would like to do something responsible and forward thinking. So do you have any tips for someone in that situation?
Well, I think it's just, I hate to sound flippant, it's just trying to communicate to the sectors that are in this business. Again, where we're located in the heart of Vancouver, there's a organization called the Urban Development Institute, has like 900 members of developers. You know, you kind of do a, my predecessors and other government officials did speeches. Next thing you know, they're all saying, okay, like we'd like to be involved in that. But, generally, we have to also deal with the government of Canada because it involves tribal lands, and, you got to bring them on side, and, you have to extend your communication plan all the way to, in our case, to Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. And by doing so, in that, long wire that goes all the way there, you're hitting other constituents and other stakeholders and other people that are excited to be involved in it. On smaller projects, we have a dedicated housing nonprofit housing institute, HIAM, that's just been created, and it's going to do, I think it's 450 units for low income individuals. And there again, it's just a matter of showing the need and saying we like to do this. And again, I don't know, maybe it's where our location is. We just found that it was fairly easy to get people to backstop it from a financial perspective, and also utilizing our own resources.
I might jump into this too. I think, we're at a stage now where if you are a design firm or a lot of developers, this isn't new to them. And the myth that if you do something like this, it'll break the, you can't do that. That's just kind of crazy. New technologies are coming, new material sourcing's coming. And so if your questioner is saying, I have this property, I agree. There's different associations. Just stop into some of the architects in town. There isn't any of them who aren't trying to be, to a certain extent, leading edge. I won't say there isn't any, but there's lots of them who this is what they want to do. And on the arena end, like I've received 5, since this is out there now, I've received 4 or 5 calls already from people who are cities who are in their arena development beginning, going, how did you do that? What's important to do? So we're on something that isn't just a fad. It's a long-term trend of just being a heck of a lot smarter. And a lot of people are engaged on it.
View, and this actually, some component of this came in through the Q&A as well. That's something I've been thinking about. So, and Jenny referenced at the beginning that, you know, on an individual level, you can make almost no impact on this massive, complicated problem of climate change. And I believe that also extends into like individual project level. But where the impact comes is in the ripple effect that you as an individual or your project can have in inspiring others to take similar action. And both of your projects are really, you know, forefront, cutting edge, first in their field projects. And I was just curious if both of you could speak to that. What are your hopes for kind of rippling out this idea, you know, Ken, in your case, across other sports complexes, Bernd, in your case, maybe perhaps across other housing developments? Just, you know, speak to that idea.
Well, I do think it takes some leadership for the sort of the first one to say we can do this and we can make that work. And I also believe strongly that industry trends happen. I mean, if you think about even some of the basics of what we're doing in terms of basic waste management in arenas and sports facilities, 20 years ago, that just didn't exist. And now it's the standard to do. Or recycling rebar on construction 40 years ago. People didn't do that when they tore down a building. So industry trends is happening. And one of the things that, you know, Jenny and I have talked about at Western, and I've been fortunate to meet and spend quite a bit of time with presidents around Hawa. There's no reason why universities shouldn't start not a competition, but a let's do this right, both in their new buildings, but in their campuses. So I think you can start to get the word out that in an industry, universities, sports facilities, housing projects, it's doable. And I think momentum is everything. And as momentum catches on, more people follow that.
Yeah, I would agree with Ken on that. You know, the momentum is there, and in our case, what we're trying to do is break down a lot of barriers that, rightly or wrongly, have been created in regards to Indigenous groups such as ours. And in this case, you know, Sanok will be cutting edge, a massive project, but it probably isn't going to be exactly right. And we have other projects that are going to be going on after this, and we'll learn from those experiences and build upon even a better sustainable project. Like after this 11, there's another 4 at a different property that we're investigating, and probably another 8 after that. But for us, the ultimate outcome of this is capacity development and know-how, transferring of our culture to an industry that generally doesn't accept it. I was pleasantly happy to hear about the Seattle hockey rink and utilizing the Coast Salish hat, the rain hat. And there's a lot of that will be part of the Sanok component as well. It allows us to show people that there is an alternative, and in this case, from a cultural perspective, I was just reading one of the questions about forestry. Why are you using wood? Isn't that kind of counterintuitive? Well, yeah, a tree is better than cement, and we're utilizing tracts of forest that have been designed to regrow, utilizing our customary practices, but maintaining the old growth forests. In fact, Squamish has led the charge here in BC on moratoriums on old growth forests and fighting the government on that particular topic. So those are just some of my thoughts going forward and how it's going to be.
Awesome. I want to just put in a little plug, as Ken had mentioned, the opportunities that universities have here at Western. Western was actually the first campus in the US to offset 100% of its carbon emissions from electricity usage back in 2005 with a self-imposed student fee to fund the purchase of renewable energy credits. Today, Western has committed to be carbon neutral by 2030 and is in the planning stage for a new building that will be carbon neutral. That's a pretty exciting development project. And Ken has had a hand a bit in advising on that.
It's the Electrical Engineering and Computer Science Building. And it's being listed and being funded partially by the state, partially by philanthropy. And again, it is being launched and designed as zero carbon. But what's even more exciting to me and to Sabah, frankly, is let's take that to the rest of the campus and say, what else can we do to some of the buildings that aren't there? It's, you started out with a very, I think, impactful, where are we on the subject of climate change? And I'll admit, it makes me sad to see people feeling as bad as they are. I'm not saying they shouldn't either. I'm just saying if we can turn some of that frustration and feeling bad, and there's lots of reasons to what can we do. I think that serves a lot of purposes, both from somebody's own sort of well-being and turning the corner on it, and just saying, we're not going to believe that we're just to the point that there's just almost no hope. Let's start building things and doing things where we can generate that hope. And so again, please believe me, I'm not being judgmental. There's a lot of reasons I can feel that way too, but trying to pull out of it and take some positive steps, like Burns' organization. It just sounds like it's doing so many fantastic things. Let's try to use that as a model to get more people to do that. So anyway, it's great.
And even though I know we've said that individual actions, the power of them is sometimes not so much in the individual action, but more in the sharing of it and getting your friends to do it, and your friends and your friends and your friends to do it. I'm going to put in the chat box the Climate Pledge initiative that's happening on Western's campus. It's encouraging students to take individual actions wherever you are from, whether you're in a business or in a consulting group. We all have the ability to share our actions and promote them amongst others and get everybody to kind of change their bad habits. But the big ones are where we're going to get the leverage. And that's just exciting to see that the standards seem to be changing.
I'm also going to mention this, the Seattle Aquarium Project is making the same pledge now. They are doing a new ocean pavilion on their waterfront. They've made the decision to do what they need to do to get certified zero carbon. And much like President Ranhawa, they are saying, how do we go back to our existing facility and over the next 10 years, get it to the point we need it to be? So it's just, three real serious projects of decent scale in the Northwest, close in here, that they're exciting.
Yeah, retrofitting has huge opportunities for sure.
Yeah, and I would just encourage people, we have a Q&A, and please, if you have questions for our panelists, please post a question in the Q&A and we'll try to get them answered here. There's a couple things that have come in various ways, and one of them is that they say many of us view the concept of sustainable development with skepticism. How do you respond to those of us who see this that it is impossible to engage in sustainable use of a non-renewable resource because any exploitation of a given resource will inevitably lead to exhaustion of a finite stock? So I'm wondering if one or both of you could address that.
You're going to have to ask that again. I'm dead serious. One more time.
I guess it's just, questioning whether sustainable development, can you have sustainable development if you're using the Earth's resources to develop and all resources are depletable, at least according to the person. So just comment on that. Kind of pushing up against the very idea of whether development can be sustainable.
I think development can be smart and get smarter and better and have less impacts. I think as long as we have the amount of people in the world, and at least in the region, there's going to be some level of impact on resources. It's a matter of, can you rejuvenate those resources and make them sustainable. I think that could start from the very sort of simple how you live, how you eat, how you commute, how you build. And I think there are smart ways to do that. Are they perfect? I don't know. Can we get to zero, that there is no impacts on anything? No, but there will be impacts, but you can regenerate what you impacted. I guess that's my general philosophy.
There's also, there's a comment or a question in the Q&A, Ken, about Amazon's role in this. And I think it's no big surprise that Amazon hasn't had a reputation for being the greenest company in the world, and haven't always matched up with their talk, I guess, and their talk and their walk hasn't always lined up. I know you don't work for them and don't need to represent them, but I wondered if you had any comment about that.
I'm certainly aware of those. My interactions with Amazon have been primarily on this climate pledge and what it means to them and what they're doing about it. And all I can say from my interaction, and I mean this sincerely, I've been blown away with how important it is in the organization, how they're staffing up to focus on it, how they're investing money, real serious money, for research, for innovation. And so from my end, I want to take that and build on it. And that's what our relationship is about. We've had nothing but, I've met with a lot of their people who are doing research on sustainability and all the type of things we're talking about here. It's a very serious part of the organization. Are they perfect? Nope. Are they moving in that direction? I'm certain they are. And from my interactions, they've been extremely positive.
Thanks. There's another question that came in about sea level rise. And Bern, I wonder if in Vancouver, you've had to factor that into consideration in the construction project that you're looking at.
Oh yeah, definitely. We have taken that into consideration, and the way they're going to build these sites, and amongst other sites, that's a major factor of consideration, fortunately.
Yeah, and how do you do that? Is that a matter of elevating the actual construction of the project?
Yeah, I'm clearly not I'm not a constructor. I don't know the technical aspects of it, but yeah, I think it has to do with something like that to make sure it's high enough to, because there's been a lot of studies done on and projections done in and around the Vancouver area. And, I vaguely recall seeing those studies, and they plotted where certain parts would be a little bit higher versus lower. That's not very technical.
Yeah, no, but I mean,
we did this. It's a similar situation in Seattle. I was involved in the seawall reconstruction, and a lot of modeling, like Bern said, that okay, we need to build the wall higher than the old one was. what level of height do we need to get to? And it's all based on projections, and there's a range in those projections, and the decision was made, like Bernard, I can't remember the exact decision, but the wall, it was taken into account, and the height of the seawall was increased because of projections of sea level rise.
Positive things that I think is going on in terms of addressing climate change is that there's a groundswell of planning efforts going on among small and big cities to essentially develop climate action plans, climate strategies, that kind of thing, where they are really digging deep into projected sea level rise, how they're going to mitigate it, how they're going to deal with it, how they're going to reduce their carbon emissions. So more and more cities are doing that, which is great. And sea level rise is a huge component of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, most cities now have good climate action plans, or they've gone through a process of figuring out how their infrastructure would be affected by climate, both sea level rise and other variables. Here in Bellingham, I think we've had quite an excellent process of incorporating climate into planning activities and have some incredible goals. So I'd say for those who are listening, go check in with your city or town to make sure that they are on board and being aggressive in how they're looking at climate predictions and helping to mitigate and be progressive, be bold.
I agree. That's a really good word. I really mean that on this. And I think, again, I'm speaking for the people who I have been working with on this. It was a bold move, and not one of them has second guessed it. And the amount of positive response, not just because Coldplay's coming, but just the positive response of doing that, it has been real, and it's great.
Yeah, trendsetters. There's something to that. And in terms of individual actions, the letting your elected officials know that you care, that you're paying attention, that you want investments made in a climate friendly way, that's a powerful statement. I remember years ago, there was some figure that your voice counts for about 27 people when you write in or call your elected official, because there's so many of us who aren't speaking up. So make your voices matter. That's really important.
The other thing I wanted to add was, Enchkai is named after a mountain in Squamish territory, also known as Garibaldi. And it's about a legend that talks about a flood. And so Squamish, the indigenous peoples have dealt with sea level rises historically. And there's legends about that and what they did and how they dealt with it. So, in our case in the Sanok, it's we have quite a unique outreach with the elders council that provide a lot of info onto modern technological things that we're trying to introduce. And it's quite amazing how someone that doesn't have a PhD in engineering knows a lot more than those PhDs with engineering degrees. And just from past experiences that have been handed down time after time after time. So all I'm trying to say there, and I don't want to sound cliche-ish from an Indigenous perspective, is, there is a wealth of information from whether it's Squamish or the Haida or Coast Salish, all the Coast Salish tribes that reach down to even your neck of the woods. I would almost encourage people to find out what they're thinking about things that relate to the environment, how that applies to, in this case, modern construction technologies. You'd be quite surprised what can come out of that. The elders have wisdom that sometimes will totally shock you. It shocks me all the time. And but I've learned to listen to that. So I encourage people to do the same.
Good advice.
Wonderful suggestion.
Yeah.
And
Ginny, if I may, real quickly, I just wanted to follow that up, Vern, by saying that I watched the beautiful video about the SNOC concept, and it was incredible. I encourage anybody here to watch that video. It's so inspirational and so beautiful, and it speaks to what you just said about the infusion of Indigenous knowledge into this work and the importance of it. So I just wanted to acknowledge that and say that there's a beautiful video that kind of goes a little deeper on that.
We have just on a different subject that probably also hits home is up here in BC. You may have heard we had a lot of wildfires, and same in northern parts of Canada, whether it's in Manitoba or in Ontario or Quebec. And there's a move for the people, whoever those are in charge, to actually start to listen to the Indigenous groups that have been dealing with forest fires forever. And so, there's a movement to finally say, okay, well, let's figure out how to deal with that from an Indigenous perspective. Again, it just shocks people that this knowledge has been there forever, but no one's ever listened to us, because obviously it's a marginalization of a culture, right? But again, I'm encouraging you to look into that from wherever you may be able to source those type of wisdoms. I think it's worthwhile.
thank you. I'm trying to put the link to that video in the chat. There we go. Yep. And also, I'll put in another plug for there's a Fairhaven College is having a Daryl Hilaire of the Lummi Nation talk next week. And I'm going to put that in the chat box as a last resource here for folks. And then I just really want to thank our speakers for spending the time with us today. It's just been wonderful to have you and learn from you and chat with you. Really appreciate the gift of your time. And thanks to everyone who's watching.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. And, we'll talk soon, I assume.
Would love to.
Okay, have a great day.
Thanks all.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.